Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Mr. Chair.
Good morning.
Yes. Good morning,
Good morning.
Mr. Mason. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Mason.
It is, good morning, Miss Petty. Thank you. It is, what is today? The 29th of September, and it is time. It's actually what time is it? 9:06, so we're late today, but call to order the board meeting for September of the State Board of Education of the state of Georgia. And I will turn it over to Ms. Kennemore, who at this time will introduce our speakers for our invocation and inspiration, and then the pledge. Ms. Kennemore.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
See, I got a better reception than you.
He warmed us up.
Okay, I'll give him credit for that. First, let us pray. Lord God, we thank you for another day that you've given us to be able to come before your presence and to do things that you have assigned for us to do for all the students and children across the state of Georgia. Lord, help us to be able to do the work that you have set before us, not for our glory, but for yours, and for the purpose of educating every child in this state with a rigorous and appropriate education. Lord, help us to hear, to see, and to understand what we need to do, and to lead and guide each one of us. Bless every household that is represented here today, and help us, Lord, to always know that you are worthy of praise, glory, and honor. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
Today we have the American Association of Adapted Sports Program. And before I introduce Ms. Tommy Storms, I just want to say I've seen some of these games, and they are as exciting as anything. And it's just so it's just so important for us to support our children, regardless of any disabilities that they may have. Ms. Tommy Storms, she has been a broadcaster and music business professional for over 30 years. As a member of the 1996 Paralympic Organizing Committee, she was assistant chair of the Volunteer Placement Committee, overseeing and training and placement of over 70,000 volunteers from around the world who came to support disabled athletes. Within weeks of the end of the 1996 Atlanta Paralympic Games, she joined with Beverly Vaughn, the chair of the Paralympic Volunteer Placement Committee and therapeutic recreation specialist working in adapted sports, to begin the American Association of Adapted Sports Program. The result was America's first and still only interscholastic governing body for students with physical disabilities, affording them the same types of opportunities, health, and physical benefits that are commonly afforded to their non-disabled peers. AAASP is now celebrating over 25 years in Georgia, and Georgia is the most recognized education-based model in the nation. To tell us more about AASP, please welcome Ms. Tommy Storms.
Thank you so much. We are so excited to be here today. We're always happy to share student success stories and some pretty inspirational things as well. I'm here, and you have a list in front of you with representatives from pretty much all of our programs around the state. We're not all going to speak, but it was important enough to us to let you know how much we appreciate the fact that you all have really helped make this possible throughout the state of Georgia. Now, Georgia is our prototype. After the Paralympic Games, we realized that there were hundreds, indeed thousands of students with disabilities who did not have access to traditional sport because it may not have been appropriate for them. So we created a model that worked. We have made local programming something that's possible, and many communities still struggle to make that possible. And so here we are. Georgia is our prototype, a fully realized infrastructure for students with physical disabilities who don't qualify for Special Olympics and may not be appropriate for regular athletics. And so they are extended those same opportunities. We do consult other people around the country, and indeed we are in partnership with the National Federation of State High School Associations and the National Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association. Through Georgia High School Association and an alliance that was formed in 2001, so 20 years ago almost, that alliance extends governing body responsibilities to us for these programs. And we do train your teachers, your staff, your coordinators, administrators, and others to make these possible. So enough about that. We hope that you'll come out to a game. We have got a schedule attached, and you've got phone numbers of people from your district. Please reach out, talk to your parents, come out to a game. We would love to see you, and I promise you it will be eye-opening and life-changing. I'm now going to introduce Christy Jones. She is the former coordinator for the Houston County program, and she's just going to introduce the couple of people who are going to come up and say some things to you. And again, we thank you so much for letting us come out today and invite you to come out and be a part of our family in the gyms across Georgia. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Thank you for having us today. I wanted to thank you for helping us with this program. ASP has been a wonderful program for the students of Houston County. We've actually had 5 students move on and play at the collegiate level and have received tuition assistance and even a full ride scholarship to play wheelchair basketball at that level. So this program has opened doors for our athletes in Houston County that never would have been there without ASP and without your support. So I really do want to thank you for that. And like Tommy said, I have my competitors, but also people that I consider my friends. We have Casey from Muskogee County here this morning. You want to come on up?
Thank you for driving from Columbus.
Yeah, I went to 3 different parking decks, but I finally got the right one. Good morning. I just want to tell you how much this program means to these kids. I had a young man not graduated about 4 years ago, and his dad told me at the end of his 4 years, he said, you know, my son never had a buddy call and say, do you want to do something? Could you imagine going through 4 years of school and not having anyone to have that relationship? He said, this is his group. This is who he does things with. This is who things. So it builds those relationships for these kids that pretty much wouldn't have that. We all know what lessons sports teach. These kids get that opportunity to know teamwork, what it feels like to win, to lose. There's so many things that they carry on into their life, and it's amazing. If you haven't ever attended, find time, attend a game, see these kids, see the joy, and your support means so much to these kids and to our program in Muskogee and across the state.
Also, Coach Sebastian Tillman from Clayton County.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I just want to thank you all for the time and effort and everything you put into making this possible for us. My student athletes, they think the world of the ASP League and wheelchair sports. It gives them confidence. It helps them know that they can do anything everybody else is doing. Most of my students are deaf or hard of hearing, so socially, they stick with each other. So when they're on the field, on the court, they see other students that are, only physically disabled, who can speak, who can hear, or even those who are less functioning physically. So it helps them understand more disabilities and helps others understand theirs. Just a confidence level when they get out on the court. I have a new guy, he has spina bifida, and he caught a pass in one of the games, and he looked at me, he said, did I do good? And I said, yeah, man, you did so good, and his face just lit up. He said, yes. So it's moments like those that really help us, stick with this, because it does take a lot of time and effort on our part after working and coming in after work. So we do appreciate you, and we hope you guys continue to do everything you can to make it possible for us to keep our students involved in things like this, because they wouldn't have a chance any other way. So we really do appreciate you guys. Thank you.
And from DeKalb County, we have Miss Najee Smothers. I'm sorry, I've always called her Najee's mom. It's Miss Smothers from DeKalb County. She's a parent of one of our best athletes currently on DeKalb County.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How y'all doing? My name is Noray Smothers. My son's name is Najee. He's now 15. He's been playing for DeKalb since he was 6. This dude's an amazing athlete. He plays everything. He plays basketball, handball, soccer, tennis. He plays everything. Anything you think of, he plays it. And he's amazing. So I think with this program, because he was only 6 when he started, made him an amazing person. Najee is a people person, never meets a stranger. Everywhere he goes, he became a mentor to everyone. And so little kids want to be like Najee. He's dangerous on the court. Does these crazy moves that no one else can do but him. He is just an amazing kid, and I really appreciate the program because without that, the confidence that he has crazy confidence, right? So he thinks he could do anything, and he really can. But he can do anything that he puts his mind to. But because of this program here, Najee's able to explore everything that he wants to do. You know, so being only 15, he's pretty. God, this was amazing. I don't know. I guess because he's my kid, but he really is amazing. His athleticism is beyond anything I could ever imagine for him. I thought he would just be like this little scrawny kid. You know, he was really tiny when he started out. Even going against these big old kids, I was like, "Watch my baby," but now he's the big kid going over. So I really just appreciate this. I hope y'all continue because without this, the confidence that he has, he wouldn't have. You know, because y'all have given him the strength, the motivation. Y'all have given him the that's the thing that he can do anything. You know, so just the confidence that he's established throughout the years of being with us. What, not 9 years now? It's amazing. And I love y'all for it because, you know, without y'all, he wouldn't be who he was. I'm good.
And I can vouch that he's an amazing kid because I coached against him at the state tournament this year, and I had to triple team him just to slow him down. So he is a rising super athlete, and I can't wait to see what he does in the next few years. This is my friend to me, Mr. Mike Phillips from Gwinnett County. We are probably the two biggest rivals in the organization. Gwinnett Heat and the Houston County Sharks have met up on many occasions. But I have great respect for Mike and everything he's done with his program.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here to address y'all today. And Christy's right. We have played in several state championship games, and they've won most of them. And our motto was we're number one at being number two. And she runs a great program and everything. So I'll be quick. Thank you for your support in helping with our adaptive sports program. This is my 43rd year in education. And everything that I've done from teaching and coaching and administration, when we started our program 14 years ago, this has been the biggest blessing of those 43 years. Because I have seen students do things that they didn't think they could do, and I've had parents say, I never realized my child could do that. And these students went on to become great athletes, great human beings. I counted up the other day, I think we've had approximately about 50-something students come through our program. 27 or 28 of them have graduated. I've had students go to University of Georgia, University of Alabama, University of Indiana, North Georgia College, Georgia Gwinnett College, University of Massachusetts. So these kids are going on and furthering their education and making a contribution in life. And I believe part of that is because of the experiences they've gotten in this program, realizing that they can do things. And they don't, their disability is not a disability to them. I'm a storyteller. I'm going to tell one quick story. I had a student a few years ago tell you Keetra's story. Keetra was about this tall, and because of her legs and everything. And when Keetra graduated her senior year, she wrote me a letter like a lot of kids will do, basically just thanking me for all this and everything. But the statement she put in there that really touched me was, she said, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, she said, before I got into this program, I used to think I was invisible. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody saw me. This program's given me an identity. It's given me a new family. It's allowed me to do things I never thought I'd do and be a part of a team. And I just want to thank you for allowing me to have that opportunity. And I don't know if you ever had a student say that to you. They felt like a child felt like they're invisible. That's a powerful statement. And so, again, thank you for everything. Anything that we do investing in students' lives is not a waste of time or a waste of money. So thank you for everything.
Again, we thank you for letting us introduce you to our family. If you aren't aware, I'm just going to leave you with a few statistics. These kids graduate at about a 52% rate average across the U.S. Our students are graduating at 82%. They're either on par, we do allow special education students, but they must be cognitively aware enough to apply safety to the team and to themselves. But that 82% includes those who get their certificate and go on. About 25% of our students do go on to higher education. These kids are twice as likely, according to the U.S. Department of Education, to be bullied because they are seen as different, and they are. They're twice as likely to drop out of school. We have, as you already know, problems with students who have physical disabilities in particular, who have delayed graduations and lots of hospitalizations. We see all of that affected through this program. And I'm just going to leave you with one other thought that my co-founder used to say to me when things get tough. If God wants something, you can't tear it down. And if he doesn't want it, you can't build it up. And we live by that every day, and we're 26 years into this, and it's in large part due to you. So God bless you, and thank you so much for your support and for letting us come and be with you today.
Any questions? Does anyone have any questions for the group?
I'll just ask one, and this is more of a, if you had something that you'd say, I guess you're the genie in the bottle right now, and said, how can the state further help and support your organization and these students?
We are currently expanding out of more of our metro areas to a regional model with Georgia High School through the Reeses. And we have formed one regional team, which is the West Georgia Wolverines, which is sponsored in large part by Troop. And we're forming the Georgia Storm. If you didn't catch my last name, it is Storms. I really like the name they chose for that team. And that will serve the 8 school districts in Griffin. But what we hear, even with our Reeses and some of our school systems, is they still think we're an outside group. So we have to explain to them, even to come and present to them about what we do. So we've got to do more in marketing, and if we could have a presence somewhere on the Georgia Department of Education website, perhaps some things like that just would point people to our website and let them know, no, we're part of the team, we're part of the group, and we're here and just as invested in educational outcomes as you are, but that's one of the big things.
We could, our head of communications over here, Megan Frick, so maybe I'll kind of follow up sometime
Yes, sir.
today. So
Yes, sir. I look forward to working with you.
kind of help promote what's out there, okay?
Thank
Anyone
you.
else?
You have something to say?
No, but thank you for being here. I wasn't aware of this program, and probably my fellow board members, most of us, I think, were probably. So thank you for coming and making us aware of what dynamic things you're doing for these students.
Thank you so much. You make it possible.
Obviously, some of the best things I heard, it was all great, but you're moving children, these beyond, from a 52% graduation rate nationally to an 82%, to those who participate in this program. There's no price you can put on that. It's just, it changes lives, so.
Well,
Thank you.
if if it's any indication that we recently had a graduate who put the tattoo of his team on his arm, I think we're doing all right. So thank you so much. We do again appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and I implore everybody here at the board to go to one of these games. It is so exciting.
Let me say one other thing. Christy Jones is one of our most successful coordinators, and I'll tell you why. Her school board is behind what they do. Her local community is behind what they do. The media is behind what they do. They have JV and varsity teams in Houston County. And they put together something, what is it you call it? It's the Guppies and the...
Sharks versus Guppies.
Yeah, it's the Sharks versus the Guppies. Well, that would be you. We would be putting you in a wheelchair and calling you a guppy, and they will shellac you when we're done. But the media come out and they do it as a really good PR thing. But we're always open to those kind of ideas. We are not beneath shaming any of you for your athletic skills. We invite you to come and be a part of that. So,
To do it.
Ms. Storms,
Yes.
can you lead us in the pledge, please?
absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, and what an inspiration, truly an inspiration to hear about all the great things that are going on, and maybe we can find a way to embarrass some board members with some of the events. But thank you for everything and what you do, and we appreciate you. We've got a few guests with us today. We like to give a shout out. I have a list here that Ms. Jerry has gone around, and if I omit any names or if for whatever reason you didn't make it on the list, please let us know who you are and why you're here. We've got a couple of our Cognia partners. We've got J.D. Harden and Dr. Greg Arnsdorf. Thank you all for being a part of today's meeting. We've got a media partner, Jeff Amy from the AP is here. Thank you, Jeff, for being here. We've got Sebastian Tillman from Clayton County Schools, the Clayton Eagles. Go Eagles. We've got Dr. Debbie Alexander from CSRA RISA. We've got some of our Foothills partners, Bonnie Knight and Paul Williams from Foothills Charter. We also have Roger Fitzpatrick from Mountain Ed Charter High. We have Dr. Shannon Downs, which RISA?
West Georgia.
West Georgia, all right. We've got Dr. Jody Barrow from GSSA, Buddy Cosley from Gale. We've got Tina Ingberg and Beth Haynes from Decoding Dyslexia.
And Megan Swingle.
Hello, how are you? Thanks for coming. We've got Tom Cabala from Mercer University, Tift College of Education. How are you, sir? Good to see you. Did I miss anyone? And I'm sorry if I did, but please give a shout out. Who we got? Hey, Margaret. How are you from Page?
I'm good.
Good
Good morning,
to see
I'm
you.
Margaret Ticaroni from Page.
Margaret and I were law school classmates at Mercer Law School, so.
The story is I can tell.
Oh, yeah. Please don't.
Same.
Emily on it?
Sam Leona with Impact Public Affairs.
Good to see you. Who else? Who did I miss? Anyone? Yes, ma'am.
Sherry Sherman.
Good to see you. We've got you on the agenda for our retreat coming up. Absolutely. Looking forward to hearing from you. Anyone else? All right. Well, we'll get started with our meeting. And I do not believe, do we have any public hearing? Anything needs to be? All right. We will move on to build our consent agenda. It's my understanding there is no business for the state schools committee. There's no business for the audits committee. So I will turn to Mr. Matt Donaldson for budget committee items.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee met yesterday and moved items 1 through 9 to the consent agenda.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. 1 through 9. We will turn to Rules Committee and Ms. Fenifetti.
Yes, the Rules Committee met yesterday and we're moving items 1 and 2 to the consent agenda.
1 and 2. Thank you. We will move on to District Flexibility in Charter Schools. Mr. Scott Sweeney.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The committee met yesterday and decided to move items number 1, 2, and 3 to the consent agenda.
Thank you, sir. I will now ask, is there any other, or are there any other items that need to be placed on the consent agenda? Mr. Benton, do we have some items from you?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a recommendation. Good morning, everyone. To move the following to the consent agenda: the individual student waivers, the minutes of the August 24, 2022 executive session, the minutes of the August 24th through 25th, 2022 state board meeting, the minutes of the September 13th, 2022 called state board meeting, the September 2022 personnel report, and the September 2022 legal report, with the exception of 2 legal appeals that are being pulled for a separate vote.
Thank you, Mr. Benton.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that should be placed on the agenda as we build the consent agenda? All right, we're gonna take a brief recess, 10 minutes. We'll come back at 9:45 and resume with our consent agenda. right. Everyone should have before you a copy of the consent agenda. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts, or do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve. Second.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. A motion second by Mr. Sweeney. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? I believe there are actually two items that have to be pulled for a separate vote on the consent agenda as well.
Just a point of clarification, you're not just approving the consent agenda,
Correct.
you're approving the agenda.
The agenda itself, correct. But we do have two items.
Separate vote.
Mr. Benton, we have some items that need to be voted on separately.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir. All right. Individual legal case number 2022-28. It is recommended that the State Board of Education reverse the decision of the local board in case number, again, 2022-28.
And do I have a motion approving that? Motion. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Second.
Second.
All right, Ms. Petty, any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
The second one is individual legal case number 2022-31. It is recommended that the State Board of Education remand with instructions the decision of the local board in the case number 2022-31.
All right, do I have a motion reflecting the recommendations?
So moved.
Mr. Johnson, do I have a second? Ms. Kenmore? All right. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
All right, passes. Thank you, Mr. Benton. Any other business?
That's it.
All right,
Thank you,
great.
Chair.
All right, I do not believe we have a need for executive session, so we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
We have nothing to report at this time. I did want to make a call, I guess informative clarification. Yesterday during our presentation with the testing pilot, there was at least a concern that was mentioned that we had perhaps had not passed or forwarded our mandatory reporting to the members of the General Assembly and Legislature, but I did want to just assure the board that we have met our obligations according to the state law.
Thank you, sir. All right, we'll move on to the chair's report. Just a couple of things that I've got, and then I'm going to turn it over to Helen, who's going to introduce some speakers that we have. We have our retreat coming up in a couple of weeks at Jekyll Island. It's going to be a really good event. Mr. Mike Long's been putting that together for us, and we appreciate that. Really excited. Our theme this year is going to be about pathways, career pathways. So we're excited. Some of the off-site things that we're going to be doing down at Jekyll. So we're excited for that. Mr. Donaldson, Mr. Griffin, and I met with the department about putting together a meeting schedule for 2023. And so we're looking at that and looking at dates, and hopefully we'll have that to you all in November to look at. And if anyone has any recommendations, we can approve it in November or in December. I will say that maybe coincidentally, it coordinates nicely with the Braves home schedule. Just saying. We also are looking at amending the bylaws. That's something that Mr. Donaldson's been working on, and something that we hope to present to you all so that we can have off-site meetings, at least one off-site meeting next year. We also are looking at the July meeting being a one-day meeting where we would have committees in the morning and then the actual meeting in the afternoon, and we're going to try that out and see how that works, because July seems to be a very short meeting. There's very little business. The budget's already, started July 1, and so July seems to be a good meeting to try to do that and see how it works, and if it doesn't work, then at least we tried it. So we're looking at that. Also, I have asked Ms. Helen Rice if she will chair our nominating committee, and so she's putting together her committee, and hopefully we'll have a report for us in November. If you have an interest in being an officer, we elect officers every year. It's one-year terms, and so if you have an interest in serving as an officer or have some recommendations of who you'd like to nominate, please contact Ms. Helen Rice, and she'll take that into consideration. With that being said, Ms. Rice, are you ready to introduce our speakers?
I am. Good
All right.
morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, good. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with y'all, but we're moved in and I'm back to some form of normality. Well, I'm really excited today about having our speakers here today, Ryan Lee James and Comer Yates from the Atlanta Speech School. Comer Yates is the executive director of the Atlanta Speech School and has been there for more than 20 years. The Atlanta Speech School was established in 1938 as a free clinic for children who were deaf and hard of hearing. But today, the Speech School is now the nation's most comprehensive center for language and literacy. It has 3 preschools, a K-6 school for children with dyslexia, and a clinic offering therapeutic academic services to advanced learning, and the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy. Ryan Lee James is the Chief Academic Officer and the Director of the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy. That is a professional development center focused on promoting literacy outcomes with the support of the Cox campus, which is a free learning platform. In saying all this, I think you'll find that Comer is dedicated to the eradication of illiteracy and helping every child find their voice, and Ryan is also dedicated to the services of literacy and learning. So in saying that, I'll turn it over. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there with you in person, but I'll turn this over to Comer Yates and to Ryan Lee James.
Good morning, everybody. This is a real privilege to be with y'all, and first thing to thank y'all for your public service to Georgia's citizens. And today I'm here to talk about our littlest residents of Georgia and their futures. I've been lucky to be at the speech school. Helen, thank you so much for allowing us to be here. I've been at the speech school for 25 years, and I came there in awe of what people were doing there, and I remain in awe of my colleagues. Our purpose is our work has been around literacy and reading instruction for children who should struggle for a lifetime because of dyslexia or deafness or speech or language problems. And our work is to beat the odds for our children by bringing the expertise to them necessary. And it's not just about reading, it's about children's potential. Sort of the easy way to say it is these first 9 years of life are going to decide whether a child is going to tell their story for a lifetime or someone's going to tell their story for them. I'm lucky my grandfathers on both sides of my family, they came from Monticello and they came from Ringgold, and their families struggled with education, and somehow they beat the odds. My purpose in life by being at the speech school is try to change the odds for our children. As a result, I was so inspired by Governor Kemp and what he said at his inaugural address about Georgia and all Georgians. I want people's potential not to be decided by their zip code or what county they live in. I want everyone in our state to have opportunities where they live. That's my focus. We're doing a lot of things to move the needle there. And the governor is, but what hasn't moved and what y'all have inherited is a generations old challenge around who has access to literacy in our state, who has access to their voice. And without literacy, the path forward is a challenged one. I was very, very lucky to work very closely with Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald when she was the commissioner of the Department of Public Health for Governor Deal and recognized Georgia's illiteracy crisis as a public health epidemic, impacting the quality and length, the impact that people could make on our state based on whether they could read or not. And if you go to the slide, and so you can see about where Georgia, the different areas, the red areas, are where Georgia ranks in the lowest in the country around educational attainment for our adults and our populations. What are we going to do to break this cycle? And if you look at the next slide, where we are today, 32% of our children are proficient readers. I'm sure you've heard that statistic before. And then more specifically, it's impacting all populations in Georgia, this illiteracy crisis. And it's not much different than the rest of the country. We're just 3 points below the rest of the country. What's not shown there are children not eligible for free and reduced lunch, whose literacy proficiency rate in fourth grade is at 51%. But the fact is, the science tells us that all children can read. As Dr. Fitzgerald said, and she lamented the fact, she said, you know, what we know about literacy is the same thing we know for polio. We have a vaccine to stop it and stop it now, but we don't seem to have the political will to do it. We keep talking about pilot projects and incremental changes. Well, it really is going to take a statewide effort. If all our children were drowning today from Hurricane Ian, we would mobilize a statewide effort to rescue all our children. And that's what it's going to take for all of us to do that. And we're very proud that the Cox Foundation, the Woodruff Foundation, and others from the private side have invested $60 million and are having a free online platform to train teachers, 213,000 teachers in 80 countries in all 50 states. Hospital providers train on this platform in order to eradicate illiteracy. And we are poised to keep Governor Kemp's promise and lead the country in this effort. That's what our private funders are doing. So I'm going to turn it over again around, we know what to do. Dr. Ryan Lee James left her tenure track position in higher ed to come back to Georgia because she thought this is the place where she could join with others to say enough's enough. And again, we're grateful for your public service for that purpose. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Thanks.
Thanks, y'all, for letting us be here, okay?
Thank you. Good morning, y'all. I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you for allowing us to be here, Helen, and inviting us. And as Comer said, we are extremely grateful for your public service. This issue is really near and dear to me. I have two little ones. I have a 6-year-old who goes to Woodward Academy, and I have an 18-month-old right now who's developing speech and language, and obviously we're watching it very closely. So obviously this is personal for those reasons, but as Comer mentioned, our state is really in crisis around illiteracy, and this is something that y'all know. We're not telling you anything new. This was before COVID, right? So we've talked about, and we are watching, in our roles, I'm a speech language pathologist by original training with expertise in literacy, but we are closely following the milestone data as well as the National Assessment of Educational Progress data to really understand the impact that COVID had. But what's important to know is that, as y'all know, even before COVID, we were really struggling in terms of our literacy rates in Georgia. So what do we think at the Rollins Center and at the Speech School? What does the research tell us? Again, I don't want to preach to the choir, so we're open for questions if y'all have them, because I know a lot of this information you're familiar with. But we think about the development of language and literacy starting even before birth. That in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy, a baby's auditory channel comes online. They're able to recognize their mother's voice, their other voices in utero, right? It's that early sound awareness that we capitalize on in 0 to 5, in K-3rd. That auditory channel, that early sound awareness becomes the foundation for reading, connecting sounds in your environment to print. Unfortunately, what we know is that there are many families, there are many early childhood centers that don't have the resources, the knowledge that they need, the capacity that they need to be able to implement best practices. And so that's what we want to talk to y'all today about. So again, thinking about how language and literacy develops on a continuum from the 3rd trimester of pregnancy and then to early care and learning centers, because many of our families work, right? And so we need our kids to be in safe, healthy environments where their brains can thrive. Also, that is critically important is the K-3rd education. Currently, the most widely used practices, not just in Georgia, but around our state, are practices, methods for teaching reading that have been debunked. We know they don't work. They certainly don't work for kids with dyslexia, but they really don't work for about 65% of our population, regardless of race or socioeconomic status. So we need to try to figure out or understand, how can we pull systems, districts, leaders, our RESAs, folks that are responsible for literacy in our state on board with structured literacy. So you may have heard these terms being used in different ways: science of reading, structured literacy. What does all that mean? Well, we're trying to change our language at the Speech School and influence the national conversation around structured literacy, because science of reading now is even being weaponized in ways that we certainly don't support. What is structured literacy? Structured literacy is cumulative, systematic, and diagnostic. That means that from the time a child enters kindergarten, we have a solid assessment system in place. I'm sure y'all are familiar with Senate Bill 58 or 9, around 48. Sorry, I'm new. I'm from Michigan. Give me some grace. Senate Bill 48 around children with dyslexia and our responsibility to be able to screen them as soon as they enter kindergarten. And research tells us what we need to do. We need to identify if they're struggling with early sound awareness and if they have early deficits in oral language, spoken language, and listening. This is really critical. So thinking about structured literacy as diagnostic, cumulative, and systematic. Systematic, what does that mean? That means that we are operationalizing and executing the 5 components of reading being taught every single day in an explicit manner. I want to back up a little bit and talk about briefly the difference between the development of oral language and the development of reading. So I mentioned that I have an 18-month-old, and she is thriving, learning language in her environment, and we're not teaching her language explicitly. We're not saying, subject, verb, object, make sure you get it right. She's learning language just because she's in an environment where language is spoken. Reading does not develop that way. No one is born to read. The reading circuit has to be constructed, and that happens by reorganizing those areas in the brain that were wired for oral language to be able to access written language. And so some of our methods that we're currently using, they're based on a philosophy or a theory that believes that children learn to read just by being exposed. Children don't learn to read just by being read to, because if that was the case, we'd have a bunch more kids reading, right? We have to reorganize those areas in the brain, and that takes a lot of explicitness and a lot of systematicity. These are the 5 components of reading that we know must be taught every single day. 90 minutes, maybe even 120 minutes, maybe even 220 minutes, depending on the skill level of your kids. What's also not listed here is, that should be, is morphology and syntax. The National Reading Panel told us almost over 20 years ago that this is what we need to be doing every single day. So talked about the continuum, the 3rd trimester pregnancy, that's a critical time. The early years in life, we need our families talking to babies, building their brains so that they can be in deep relationship. That's also another critical component for learning, right? Your cognitive space in the brain has got to be free to learn, which means you've got to feel safe. We also need our early care and learning centers to be well equipped with best practices. How do we instruct even our youngest learners through play, through singing, through talking? I think all of us in the room can probably agree around that. And then in kindergarten through 3rd grade, the science of reading. Now, science of reading, structured literacy, I'm sure y'all have heard of these phrases, and it is sort of controversial, right? So one of the things we want to do today in talking to y'all about is really demystify this. We want to encourage y'all, encourage others in the room. What is it, how can we support at the Atlanta Speech School? What can we share with y'all as you go back into your communities that may be struggling or grappling with, well, wait a second, We've been doing balanced literacy for a long time. This is our way. This is what we know. Recently, in the New York Times, maybe about 2 months ago, Lucy Calkins, who is at Teachers College in Columbia, really famous for balanced literacy and her programs, she said a couple months ago, I got it wrong. I got it wrong. So I think it's really important for us to step back and take note of that someone who's made a lot of money, whose programs are widely used around our state, but in other states, has said, I got it wrong. So what can we do to support our districts? What can we do to support our cities, our counties, our leaders, and of course, our families and children? So at the Speech School, Comer mentioned, funded by the Whitehead Foundation through the United Way of Greater Atlanta, we are working to construct what we call language-rich ecosystems in the city of Atlanta, also in the city of Marietta, now in Ohio, and also Alabama. So we call this work Literacy and Justice for All. I came in this morning right before we said the Pledge of Allegiance, and we said, with liberty and justice for all. And we say with literacy and justice for all. And so this starts even before a baby is born. We're doing this work at Grady Hospital. Comer mentioned Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald. We were really grateful, and this was before my time, but grateful to work and collaborate with the Department of Public Health on a program called Talk With Me Baby. This program, we also learned recently from colleagues that this program is being used in Kansas and now also expanding to the city of Marietta through Kennestone Wellstar. In Atlanta, we're working across 50 or more early learning centers to support family, friend, and neighbor care, as well as centers like the YMCA and Sheltering Arms around best practices. Included in this is also thinking about, for our pre-K students, which assessments are we using to ensure, one, that our kids are kindergarten ready, two, if they're not, and our assessments tell us that they're falling behind, how are we following that up with diagnostics? Some of that work is happening through Babies Can't Wait and referrals. Others for our older kids is happening within the school system to ensure that students get IEPs if they need them. And the work across Atlanta Public Schools includes all of the KIPP Metro Atlanta schools, and 9 schools in APS that have been deemed Tier 3 or Tier 4. I'll mention it. I won't go all the way back. Comer mentioned in the beginning that we are really struggling with literacy. 32% of our kids in Georgia were reading proficiently. It's also important to note that 9% of our kids nationally were reading at an advanced level. And so if you have kids or if you're involved with kids and you think about what level of reading do you want for your child or for the kids that you're responsible for, it is that advanced level. So we talk about 32%, and that's despicable. And like Comer mentioned, it's true across states. But the goal that we're shooting for is the advanced level of reading defined by the National Assessment of Educational Progress as being a level of reading that allows kids to think critically about what they read and apply that knowledge in context. So that's really, really what we're shooting for. This data that I'm sharing on the slide is from last year, the work that we did in Marietta City Schools. And it's just because we couldn't share all of it. There's about 100 more graphs that would accompany these. Essentially what we saw last year in Marietta under the leadership of Dr. Grant Rivera said, okay, we're gonna get rid of these reading programs that we know don't work. We're gonna follow structured literacy, and they saw huge gains in their kids last year. So when they shared the data originally, we were like, oh, this looks really great. Okay, this is about literacy and justice for all. We need you to disaggregate that data so we can look at the data by demographic. by our kids who are eligible for free and reduced price lunch, our English language learners and others. And so what we were delighted to see is growth in all areas. And in the third grade oral reading, which I'm glad we have highlighted here, you'll see that we have more work to do for our third graders. The third graders last year had 2.5 years of disrupted education, but our kindergarten data is really, really strong. Because in kids' first year of formal school last year in Marietta City, they were able to be immersed in structured literacy. So how do we change Georgia's story? Well, the work that we mentioned that's happening in Atlanta and Marietta, this constructing of ecosystems beginning before a family leaves the birthing hospital, is really what we're hoping for all kids in Georgia. Not just kids in Georgia, but obviously nationally. But starting here, that's our hope. I'm not sure what my time is because I didn't know what time I started, so I'm sorry. Okay, so are there any questions, any thoughts or wonderings that I could highlight for y'all? Because again, I think for us, oh, sorry, on the phone, yes.
Yeah. You mentioned the components of structure. I mean, you talked about structured reading, but maybe some of us don't know. I mean, when we were in our group with doing the dyslexia, working on the rule for dyslexia, structured reading came up all the time.
Okay.
And talking about those 5 components of structured reading that needed to be there. And then we got multiple texts and data that came in to show that was really making a real stride in literacy across not only our state, but Arkansas and other states. So can you just speak a little bit about the 5 components of structured literacy and why those components work together to make literacy across the state more even and balanced?
Sure. So the 5 components of structured literacy were identified by the National Reading Panel a little over 20 years ago. The National Reading Panel was commissioned to essentially this panel of experts to scour the extant literature base and say, okay, the NIH, IES, National Science Foundation included, has invested millions and millions, probably billions of dollars in literacy research. This research is critical, but it's not being translated to the people who need it. It's essentially remaining in the ivory tower, right? So the National Reading Panel said, we've got to pull these experts together, figure out what research tells us about how we should be teaching reading. Their report highlighted the 5 areas that are here on the screen: phonological awareness, vocabulary, reading comprehension, phonics, and fluency. These components I mentioned earlier, we know need to be taught in an explicit and systematic accumulative way. So for example, we need to start with letters, right? Letters, then move to connecting letters to letter sounds, then move to kids reading simple words. We call them CVC words, consonant, vowel, consonant words, and then moving to more complex words. Right now, the reading methods that we use widely are not systematic. We're not teaching things in order. We're not giving kids text that draw on the patterns that we've taught them. What else can I say? We're not, and I want to be really careful to not indict teachers because this is certainly not about teachers. A national survey showed 2 years ago that 5% of teachers reported in their pre-service training programs that they were taught how to teach reading. So this is certainly not about teachers. And back to the components of structured literacy, throughout the day, we're not intentionally building language. We know that when kids come to us in kindergarten, language, vocabulary, the words you understand and the words you use is influenced by your environment. When you come to school, we need you to learn academic language. And so we've got to immerse you all day long in academic language, right? Through conversation, we talk about turn-in talks, morning meetings, different activities to build language. Because you can build decoding, you can focus on phonics, right? You can focus on phonemic awareness and get kids to decode words. But once they decode those words, what do they have to do with it? They got to make meaning, right? And so if you don't have the language and the vocabulary to connect, you're not able to make meaning. So the importance of all of these components being instructed on explicitly and systematically each day is critical for the success of our kids. I should also note that we talk about third grade and fourth grade reading scores. Research also tells us that kids can learn to read beyond fourth grade. So as we're thinking about literacy in our areas, what we need to do, how we need to strengthen, the work that we're doing in Atlanta Public Schools goes through fifth grade. The work that we're doing with KIPP goes through fourth grade. And that's really critical because we can't leave out the older kids, right? They weren't taught structured literacy. So we can't just toss them to the wayside. We've got to figure out what sort of we know we've got to implement what sort of instruction needs to be in place for our older learners. And they are often left out of the conversation.
Thank you.
Not to get too granular, and you may have already covered this, forgive me if you have, but I'm curious to know how this is actually implemented. Is it through a third party or is it through training teachers? How do you implement this actually in the classroom, in early education and K through 4 or 5?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in the early care and learning space, what it looks like, what we've done and following national work is preparing teachers, so training infant, toddler, and preschool pre-K teachers. We do that through our free online learning platform. I think Helen Homer mentioned Cox Campus. That's funded by the Cox Foundation, funded by Whitehead. So we make the teacher training free because we know our early care and learning teachers, our infant, toddler teachers don't make a whole lot of money. And so they can't, go out and invest in that professional learning that they need. In the state of Alabama, over the last couple of years, the state of Alabama has been stipending their early care and learning teachers. I think the state of Alabama, through the Alabama Partnership for Children, has paid out a little over $300,000 to early care and learning teachers for their completion of the content that we've created. And the state of Ohio is now implementing a credential as well for their early care and learning teachers that's based on the Cox campus to essentially get them the training they need. So there is frustration in the early care and learning space with teachers like, gosh, we don't make a whole lot, but you also haven't taught us what to do. So we find that teachers are more excited and more engaged just by feeling like, okay, my institution is investing in me getting the professional learning that I need. In the kindergarten through third grade space, because so many teachers have bachelor's or even at more advanced degrees that just report, okay, so I wasn't taught how to teach reading. Again, teachers are sort of in the same space, not making a whole lot, needing to make that training free for them. What we've seen is that it has to be systems level buy-in, right? Like it has to come, like in Marietta, for example, in Atlanta, we have Dr. Lisa Herring, Dr. Grant Rivera saying, okay, we're gonna follow structured literacy. So I've gotta look at my initiatives across my schools. How can I free up some time to ensure that my teachers can get trained on this? But it also includes high quality coaching, training those literacy coaches to know what to do, how to implement. And so I mentioned the difference in how language develops versus reading. When we talk about language development, we talk about reading to kids, playing with kids, singing with kids. Those things come really natural to us because language is natural, but teaching reading in an explicit way is heavy on the science. And so teachers need time to learn that. That's not something teachers can just do passively, in the evening. So we've got to make time for them during the day to do that, but they also need a little hand-holding with implementation. And so one of the things that we do is not only get teachers the training they need, but we support the coaches. So through the work that Comer mentioned is funded by Whitehead, We've hired I think maybe 12, maybe 15 literacy coaches that support Marietta, that support Atlanta Public Schools and KIPP. And those folks are really responsible for doing a little bit of what in the beginning is like hand over hand.
Thank you. And just, you can see up there on the screen, that's the front page of the Cox campus. It's a free online, and teachers and others can go through these courses. And that's what the Department of Education in Ohio recognized their children were arriving in kindergarten already in crisis around what had been imposed on them and their families, and based on zip code, race, and ethnicity. So what they did is to sign an agreement with us to be their partner, where their preschool teachers, birth to 5, can receive credentialing through the Cox campus, so that children come into kindergarten ready to learn. And they're also content for kindergarten through 3rd grade teachers. What we keep doing, as Ryan says, is we're spending millions of dollars that we're shipping out of state to vendors of these different programs. What our private funding has done is to create free access to the science and the leading scientists in the country who've co-constructed these courses with us.
I want to just real quick back to your question about implementation. And I'm sure my time is coming to an end, but I think this question around implementation is very important, because there has been a lot of initiatives and a lot of programs, especially for really vulnerable communities. And sometimes we end up concluding like, oh, that didn't work, or, that was a failed intervention, or, oh my gosh, we invested millions and kids still aren't learning to read. And it's exactly because of what you just asked, not precise implementation. So it's not just dumping resources on teachers or systems. Hey, here's $1 million, get your training, get your coaches. It really is about precision and implementation. And so that's something that that's really critical.
So I'm really tempted to ask you the argument that a traditionalist, whole language,
yes,
would give, and what data points, I mean, you're giving them, what data points can we rely on? I mean, the resistance to this change is real. And in my mind, there's been an investment in an old way of a traditional way, I'll put it that way, of teaching this. And they have those data points as well, okay, of its effectiveness or non-effectiveness and where it is. So can you touch upon that resistance and why? I mean, because it seems it does not have, I don't know why there is a conflict other than this initial investment. I do know change takes a lot of time, but when you have data, when you have science, when you have evidence of progress for all children, it's like I still am really struggling with what a traditionalist, how they would continue to defend something when this exists. I do, and one last thing, teachers who have never been aware of this, reading specialists that I've worked with, ELA teachers, that these concepts are new. They cannot hold the blame for this if the knowledge has never been given to them.
Totally.
But then they're caught up in this perceived or real conflict that exists. So
That's a great question.
Can I just say one thing? First of all, teachers are the ones paying the price. Data just came out that teachers, doctors, and emergency room nurses are the ones suffering from the most depression and mental illness of anybody in the workforce. And showing up day after day with a promise to have children decide their own futures and not having equipped with what they need to make that change on so many different levels. I mean, this is about empowering our teachers and their agency and expertise. So that would be one place to start. This may be a terrible analogy, but I was in the World War II Museum in New Orleans this past weekend, and, you know, the Axis powers, their leaders, one committed suicide, the other signed agreements saying it was over, and yet people out in the field kept fighting the fight and not giving up, even though they had surrendered. The leader of Balanced Literacy has surrendered. I mean, she announced this summer that it's over. I was wrong. And a lot of districts now are stuck with sunk cost and something that didn't work. And Dr. Fitzgerald, so basically they've been getting a placebo. Watch when the NAEP scores come out. You're not probably going to see much of a drop in reading scores from 2 years of no instruction, because the instruction we imposed on teachers was so bad. I mean, so back to that Dr. Fitzgerald, I believe, would say, we've been giving children a placebo, and a few children have made incremental changes. And we claim, we say, oh, look at these scores, these children made progress. That progress is not aligned in any way with Governor Kemp's promise. To say that a few children made a few percentile gains is not what Governor Kemp said. Every Georgian in every county. I don't know a governor who's been more bold to make a statement like that, and we know exactly what to do. It's just going to be a matter of will. And you could say it's local control, and there are, but this is hurting children all across the state. And I don't know if you think about COVID or anything else where Governor Kemp said, as a state, this is what we have to do. And I would urge you as our state's Board of Education to ask you to consider this is what we have to do as a state.
I want to tell you, can I speak, Mr. Chairman? I've sat in this table for 10 years. I don't know if I've heard a more important and more relevant presentation than you all have brought us today.
Well, can I just say,
yes.
We watch it people say, you're so passionate. Well, the reason I'm passionate, I've sat for 25 years, and our own son's dyslexic, and he came to the speech school. I sit every day at a desk where virtually every day a parent in tears will come by my office, and because they've had access to the science of structured literacy, they will be crying and they'll be saying, my child's a different child. And I'll say, no, your child's not a different child. Your child's getting to be who they ought to be. And then I can pivot and look out the window and I can see school buses going by, knowing those school buses are on a path to nowhere because the science isn't being brought to children. And you can't help, once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. Because we know, like Dr. Fitzgerald said,
Chairman, may I make a statement?
we know exactly what to do for all children. So thank you. You interrupted me.
I'm so sorry. No, I'm just kidding. You're completely irrelevant.
Helen, Mr. Johnson's asking a question. Hold on.
But thank you for what you said.
Okay.
But I just want to say a few other things that, and Kenneth, I was going to ask the same question that you did. How do we defend the traditional way if we have a 32% success rate?
So a couple of things that are more technical to this, that not as necessarily as inspirational as Comer just shared. But one is because there has, what Kenneth pointed out, there's been some success. That if it was that some teachers have been able to make some success with some students. So I think that's why folks are really resistant. I'll also say that as a personal example, my own child's school, they're using balanced literacy, but I take her to tutoring at the speech school. And so her teacher's really excited because she's reading really well, and I'm paying for this after school, folks. And we know from a recent report that a lot of parents are doing that. It's the parents that have the means that are able to. Another thing is what Comer mentioned, and I know we have friends from Decoding Dyslexia in the room around dyslexia in Senate Bill 48. Right now, what we also know from national data is that many kids have challenged, I'll say, that a diagnosis of dyslexia is in many instances based on race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. And so even the structured literacy interventions that we know work, you've got to be able to get the diagnosis first. And there's many challenges with that, assessment, costs, we could run the list down. And so what we know from structured literacy is that we are able to teach more kids, all kids, how to read. I think the challenge, and someone mentioned it about implementation, we have to be in close partnership with our teachers. And it's what we've done in Marietta, it's what we're doing in APS and KIPP. We're not, because it could seem like we're coming over to your building maybe and throwing everything you've ever used out the window. What we're trying to do is help you understand and come to a realization that you could reach so many more kids, all kids, if we changed our practices.
Can you all stay till this meeting is?
Yeah.
Concluded? Thank you, because I don't have enough.
Yeah.
There's a lot more things I'd like to talk about.
We've got our slides.
And I'm sure my colleagues are there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Helen has a question.
I think Ms. Zoller had a question, and I think Ms. Rice had a question. Helen?
Well, I wanted to make a statement based on what was said. When our group met to review the dyslexia rules, a lot of things came out, and those of you that are there in that group, you can testify or verify with it. A lot of things came out about using different reading programs, and you're right, there was some success in that, but they also decided that there were other programs that were structured literacy that were having greater successes. So if you were using a program that wasn't, pick out the cherries in there, the things that were successful of it, and then add it to the other program that is moving the needle at a higher rate. And I think, Ken, I think I'm correct on this, our Stephanie Johnson from the DOE is training a lot of her teachers in Orton Gillingham across the state, which she has seen to be a quicker way to move the needle on reading literacy. Is that not correct?
Yeah, I don't know if that was a question for us, but yes, OG is a structured literacy-based methodology, and it works.
Yes, that is correct. Ms. Johnson's not here right now to give us the details, but and I just want to note that is a school improvement approach.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The whole school improvement approach starts with identifying one of the major problems in every school, diagnosing this very issue that we're talking about.
Okay.
Changes the whole complexity of the school if you get this right. And that's why, you all know Ms. Johnson. She's going to find the core of the challenge.
I'll say we won't program our way out of this. It can't tell you how important that is. I was really lucky to Mrs. Deal and her work, and where she read. I had a chance to ask her one time. I said, Ms. Deal, when you walk into a school, your focus is literacy. How long does it take you to know if that school is committed to literacy? And she said 30 seconds. She said, if I walk into a school and they're telling the children to whom I'm getting ready to read to be quiet, then I know they are not committed to literacy. If they have not led their children to listen and connect with me, they're not about literacy. So it is much more, the proverb about throwing the seed on the rocky soil or on the path could not apply more to programs where our teachers are being constrained about controlling our children and seeking compliance rather than building deep connections that activate the prefrontal cortex. Because without the rigor and stamina of a prefrontal cortex to build attention, working memory, and executive functions, children can't hold on to passages long enough to determine what those passages mean about who they're going to be. So please, the Orton Gillingham can teach children to decode, but that's not a path to children's freedom. That's just one part of it.
Ms. Zoller, did you have a question?
Yeah, this past Monday, I got the opportunity to see my 38-year-old son read out loud at a funeral. And he was in every program you can imagine 25 to 30 years ago because he was one of those difficult readers. And it was pretty moving for me to see that. But the question that I have is, if we adopt structured literacy and that becomes the program that we use, will that be in exclusion of everything else? Because I would assume, and I could be wrong, I haven't read all the studies, that while structured literacy may work for most kids, there might be other children that need other approaches. How would we approach that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that structured literacy is going to work for, so we said all kids. Structured literacy is going to work for all kids. I think there are going to be kids, for example, and I'm a speech language therapist, there are going to be kids that have what we call intellectual impairment. And those kids may be limited in some capacity because they have intellectual impairment, maybe because of Down syndrome or another disorder. And so we certainly consider those kids as kids and deserving to have this freedom. And that's why we are a language and literacy center, because language and having access to communication, even in the absence of being able to learn to read, is still extremely critical. I do not know of work that says that there are kids that will need other things that structured literacy won't provide. I think with structured literacy, we are going to be able to reach all kids.
And I can say that thanks to Governor Deal, I'm the past chair of the Georgia Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And by all children, we mean all children. Georgia is the only state in the country that has specific legislation around literacy acquisition for children who are deaf and hard of hearing. It's something of which we should be very proud, regardless of their modality for language acquisition.
Yeah.
So we're after every child in Georgia, unlike any other state. We're not going to get there with things that the general has surrendered. The emperor has surrendered.
The last thing to just say about teachers, because we experience this, I experience this in the work that we do, is the resistance. And even I experienced it yesterday at a APS school. Teachers get really anxious about something new because they wonder how they're going to be supported with it. And they wonder if this something new is going to just drop in their lap, or whether they're going to have the sort of implementation support they need to do it really well. And so we've got to just support our teachers. Thank y'all.
I concur with Mr. Johnson's comments. I think this is probably one of the most important discussions that I've had the privilege of listening to while here. A couple of things with regard to the structured literacy program. I mean, I think you started off with the assessment part, and what was really telling is the graph that Comer showed, kind of the heat map, for example. Mm-hmm. And I think if you look at that map, and then if you were to juxtapose that with healthcare availability, they would probably be pretty close. Probably be very, very close, not only for socioeconomic, but the access and the hospital systems and everything else. And I just remember, with my children and going for pediatric visits and the testing, that they were doing, auditory, sight words, vowel sounds, all that kind of stuff. And access to that, I think, is absolutely critical. This also strikes me as, a partnership. It's a partnership between, obviously, the families. It's teachers. It is healthcare providers. Students are an important part of that element as well. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts about curiosity with regard to reading. I'm blessed with a son who, he actually got in trouble because he thought Harry Potter was more important than listening to his teacher in the classroom. And he would hide the book underneath
Some people
his
would
desk.
agree with him.
He would hide the book underneath, and these words jumped out at him, but it was something that he was curious. So how do you encourage and build that curiosity within children?
I think that goes right back. Can I?
Yeah.
It goes right back to what Ms. Deal was saying. If you're in a school where primacy is around children being right or wrong, then curiosity, and my focus is on avoiding the consequence of being wrong. If the receptionist at the front desk, when your mom shows up late, and it happens constantly, and mom says, because she's embarrassed, I got stuck in traffic, and the receptionist sort of rolls her eyes. 10 minutes later, when your child is down the hall and the teacher says, Nona, I'm wondering, why do you think that Peter was so worried about somebody else using his chair? And Nona goes, I've never heard that. I know we're reading Peter's chair, but that's not in the book. So I don't know, just like it's a novel question. So she's thinking, I don't know. And she goes, I know what happened when my mom was wrong. 10 minutes ago, she was humiliated. I'm not going to risk being humiliated. I don't know. Instead of going, I don't know. Wait a minute. Ms. Coleman would never ask me a question that she had not given me something to try to connect with to give an answer. And plus, Ms. Coleman's not going to, she just wants to try. And I don't want to please Ms. Coleman, but she believes in me. That curiosity is that second dive into the deep cognitive space of the brain. Right now, we have schools where children are marching down the hallways on prison tiles, and the ability, then they can't code switch from the hallway into the classroom and be connected with teachers who are marshaling children to all that's happening there is brain development in the brainstem that's all about fight or flight. And perception and curiosity are the last thing you can use. And those million synapses per second being constructed here in the first years of life never go away. And a child's path is already determined before they get to kindergarten too often. All of that, I mean, again, I wish Dr. Fitzgerald were here. I am just, but it starts in the birthing hospital, like you said, and it's a will to say, what is our promise to Georgia's children? What do we believe in order to keep Governor Kemp's promise, the boldest promise I've ever heard from a governor?
Thank you.
And think about every meeting. Are we honoring that promise? And we're not honoring it with balanced literacy. We'll help a few children.
I've got a question about, we talk about teachers, I think some resistance comes from what you talked about, and some of it comes from, I've been doing this the same way for 25 years with supposed success. So when something new is introduced, I know it causes apprehension, but my wife is new into teaching, and math is very different than when we all were learning how to do math. And she was terrified, but blessed that in her college prep program, she was already learning those things. So what are we doing to help teacher preparatory programs equip teachers with this new way of thinking?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think in light of a lot of these national conversations, Comer mentioned I came from the university space a few years ago. I think in light of these national conversations, there are some universities that are starting to consider what do we need to do to prepare. Right now, your wife was in the same position that I was in. I was lucky enough to be at an institution that said this is the way. But I think that's going to take a little bit of pressure to get institutions in our pre-service programs to that point, because they do have autonomy. You go to school, you're a professor, you got a PhD, you teach, you have some autonomy there. But I think what it's going to take is like folks in this room saying, look, when you come out of school, in order for us to hire you, you've got to know about structured literacy, and that's going to put, you know, a little more pressure on our pre-service training programs. Again, it's no one's fault, because people will say that we've had some success this way, but we're leaving too many kids out. And if you look at the data, none of us are okay with our kids being that like 65%. So we've got to figure out how we have to do what it takes. I think our pre-service training programs really are going to have to come along.
At this point, like, is there any polling or surveying where you see university professors are more on the structured or balanced, or where do you find that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can check EdWeek. EdWeek usually keeps a close pulse on those things, but I have not read. I can't say because I haven't read anything that says where they are.
Well, to give one poll, and I won't cite the school and our system here in Georgia, but one of the people in special ed of that department has said the pre-service teachers being trained to teach reading in the manner that school is teaching reading, the only children they could teach to read are the 35% of Georgia's children who've never been on free and reduced lunch. And so I don't know what else to say. This is a problem that President Bush's leader around No Child Left Behind, Dr. Reed Line, identified that it was the colleges and universities' failure and the dean's entrenchment in their own research that was causing the problem. And that problem in higher ed has meant that our state has spent millions and billions of dollars training teachers who are already in the workforce rather than focusing on what they should have gotten before they ever left higher ed. And I'm very hopeful what I hear from the Board of Regents these days about driving change. And it's going to take that kind of, it's going to have to take that kind of direction.
I'm not an educator, and I'm thankful for all of you and who are. But I've sat in corporate boardrooms where and you use this word sunk costs. Yeah. You know, where were those of us that were having to use systems that no longer worked, or if they ever did, and we said this data, and the comment from those of us who were having to use those systems say it doesn't work anymore. This database doesn't work anymore. But and the responses to it, well, we spent $1 million on it, and we can't. You know, we spent $1 million. We can't. We've got to make it work. I don't want our kids to be subject to that abuse. And that's why I appreciate you being here today, because I don't care how much money we've sunk into programs that, I'm not going to say they don't work, but they're not working well. And they are marginal. I mean, the best numbers up there are not good.
Right.
So I appreciate you being here and hope that we can learn more. So as leaders, so our children can learn more in school.
Thank you.
We hope the same.
We really do. We're glad you're sitting there, all of y'all. Yes, ma'am.
Hearing all of this is sobering, because I know we can do better. And I'm on the board of the Dill Center, so we're out there working, trying to get literacy implemented in different areas across the state through grants and seminars and teaching and everything. But also another component that needs to be involved and engaged is a parent component. Hearing what you're saying about your children and everything, and all of the literacy that you are doing on your own for kids, and a lot of parents, not a lot, but few parents are out there doing the same. I know my son and his wife are doing that with their son. And when he comes to my house, before he plays or does anything, I said, what do we do? He said, we have to read. I said, that's right. I said, why? He said, readers are leaders. I said, that's right. Let's sit down, pick your book. So we read, but it's not going on in every household and every community. And a lot of parents that I've talked to, they depend on the school to take the lead and to pretty much take care of everything regarding reading. We do have parent outreach personnel in different school systems or school. We have PTAs, PTOs. We need to make sure that they are engaged and involved in structured reading program to help them push it into the communities for the parents to get engaged, involved, and also just have their finger on the pulse of what their children are achieving or need to achieve in the schools.
The horse has already left the barn by the time you get to PTOs. I mean, my opinion is that the most important literacy work happening in the state today is happening at Grady Hospital in their birthing center. 1 million synapses per second are being constructed in a child's brain in the first 18 months of life. Are those synapses going to happen in the brainstem? Are they going to happen in these deep language and cognitive spaces? And so for Grady, they have redefined the healthy delivery to mean a baby who leaves Grady with a family who can provide the necessary language nutrition for early brain development. If an Hispanic family who primarily speaks, if their home language is Spanish, and they're desperate for their child to read in English by the end of 3rd grade, and so mom speaks limited English to their child, Grady won't let them out the door. Figuratively or literally, that family, to build that reading circuit in English, has to start with access to the home language for that child to code switch as they enter into the school system. I mean, that's just one element. But Grady's the only birthing hospital in the world where construction of this reading brain is not remedial before the child ever leaves the birthing hospital.
Can I add something to that? I think, what you're saying about parent engagement is so important. We talk about families as partners in the work that we do. My husband was an ELA teacher for a long time, and when we moved back here, we moved to Jersey and we came back, and I realized in some of the work that I was doing as an SLP that one day a parent asked me, and I'd been really sort of hard on myself, but also hard on the family. I'm leaving this work every day. Like, who's doing the work with this family, with these kids? Because I was seeing all 3 of the kids, because we know, for those of us in the room that know that dyslexia, reading disability, language-based learning disabilities can be heritable. So one day this mom asked me to help her fill out some paperwork. And it was in that moment that I realized that she did not have access to literacy. And so families are partners and they should be engaged. And we have to hold top of mind that the issues that we are faced with today, the data on the screen, the data of today is also the data of yesterday. And so even those families that we're engaged with, many times they have not had access. And so as we think about, what do we do for our youngest learners before they're born? What do we do in early care and learning? What do we do in K-3? And then all the way up through high school, because those kids deserve access to. And then there's this whole family component, right? That we have to contend with, because that is just a really stark reality of where we are. And Comer mentioned Talk With Me Baby, and families can talk to babies, and we want them to, because that's what's going to build their brain. That child's going to grow to a 3rd grader, though, and they're going to come home with text. And so we want, as you said, for families also to be able to support all the way up.
And we'll finish, but thank you. The one thing, could we go back to that slide on the heat map that you asked about? One thing that's I just have to say, an eternal truth, that all parents want their child to have a better life than they did.
That's right.
And you can look at that map and pick a county that you serve or any other county, whether it's green, salmon, light green, or red. The difference in those places, in my family, my family in Ringgold, Georgia, where there were 17 children by the same mom and dad from my grandfather. But who feels powerful and who feels powerless to do anything to make that aspiration a reality? And I hope rather than continue along with this deficit model, we recognize this universal truth and then engage with our families to meet the aspiration and promise they made to their children, and along with the promise teachers are making, and finally the one that Governor Kemp is making. So thank y'all. We're really kind to give us so much time. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Does anyone have anything else for good of the board? Yes, I know everyone be safe on the roads, but keep our friends in Florida, in South Georgia, and I believe in South Carolina, they're gonna be getting some of the storm that's passing through the hurricane. And a lot of people are displaced and are visiting our state. Let's try to be good hosts to them as much as we can. And I'm hearing that there are fatalities in South Florida, and no one knows what the numbers are, but there are some villages that are devastated. I mean, just completely devastated. And I think a lot of times it's so far removed, even though it's our neighboring state, it's about, 8 or 9 hours to get to Fort Myers and Sanibel in that area. And we see it on TV and the Weather Channel, we flip on Jim Cantor, everyone gets obsessed with, he's standing out in the middle of the storm, but we lose sight of the reality of, how this impacts us, because we don't get a lot of hurricanes really in Georgia, but we see it, it's our neighboring state and it's right there. And we just need to keep them in our prayers, and any way that we can reach out to them and help them, we need to. So, anything else for the good of the board? Mr. Johnson?
I'd like to, her name's already come up today, but, and Martha probably knows this, but I heard it this morning that in Hall County, they're naming a new elementary school, the Sandra Donegan Deal Elementary School. And I thought that's so great. And I just want to give a shout out to Will Schofield, the superintendent in Hall County for that. That's great. Pretty darn cool.
Great way to honor her legacy.
It is. And the only other thing I have to say is that, all of us, many of us have, divided loyalties when it comes to college football. But when it comes to baseball, go Braves.
Go Braves, that's right.
Right?
That's right.
That's right. Nothing else is acceptable.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Jason?
Yes, ma'am.
Jason, may I just say thank you again to Comer and Ryan, and for all of you, my colleagues there that were so receptive to them. I'm very humbled by this, even the idea that I had a chance to, Tina and Ryan, and I'm very humbled that y'all allowed them that time today also. And I appreciate all of my colleagues for the questions and everything. It was very good. Thank you again.
Very good. Anything else from anyone? I will entertain a motion to adjourn at this time.
So moved.
Sorry, have a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
With